Morning, everybody. Happy Technical Glitch Mondays. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's online political editor, Dan Bloom. And we've had some technical issues this morning. Do you know, Dan, last night I was talking to someone in Kenya for one of these things, and she had a better connection than you do in Parliament.
Well,
just goes to show.
If you've ever been to Parliament, that would not surprise you in any way.
No.
Mice chewing through the cables and all sorts.
Yeah.
I'm in a fire trap right now. So, touch wood. Maybe don't touch the wood. It'll be fine.
If anybody sees smoke, please let us know so we can warn Dan. Now, we're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day. We want you to get into the comments, ask us your questions. We can't answer all of them, but we will answer the best ones. So what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on some good news about a new cancer test that will be trialled across the NHS, which could save thousands of lives. But further into the paper are a couple of stories that might be a bit more of a risk to our health. So the 6-7 spread is about the absolute chaos we've had during the weekend about COVID passports. If you don't remember, Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi a few weeks ago said we couldn't have them. Then he was forced to backtrack and say we might have them. And yesterday morning, Health Secretary Sajid Javid said at 8:30 a.m. we might have COVID passports. And then by 9:45 was saying we definitely wouldn't. So Dan, can you take us through this? What's going on and who was it who called Sajid in that hour and a quarter and told the Health Secretary that it wasn't up to him?
Well, Lord knows if I knew exactly who had called Sajid Javid and what they said, I'd probably be in a much more important sounding job than I am now. That's a real mystery. But clearly someone did, because this is just an absolutely extraordinary U-turn. Yet another just complete about-face where ministers, after much deliberation, I should add, they didn't spontaneously announce that you'll have to have a vaccine passport in nightclubs from the end of September. They sort of thought this out. They announced it early in the summer and they stuck to it resolutely. They were even hinting it could go further and talking about sort of other venues. There was even some talk of pubs and that kind of thing. And the problem is that Labour are against them at the moment, and a very large number of Tory backbenchers are against them. So there was probably someone twigged that it wouldn't have gone so well in Parliament when it came to a vote. And that's why Number 10 was very, very cagey with us when we kept asking, how is this going to come to a vote and when? You've only got till the end of September to implement it. And eventually it disappeared. Now, the important thing to note is that vaccine passports for nightclubs, first of all, nightclubs can make you show one if they want. This policy was about making it mandatory for nightclubs to force nightclubs to make you show it. And the other thing to say is that this isn't gone dead completely. They're being held in reserve for the winter. So this could come back later on.
Yes, when they've perhaps got more chance of getting it through Parliament. I was asked to show proof of vaccination when I went to a West End show over the summer, and they barely even bothered to look at it anyway. So I'm not sure quite how enforceable it is. But I'm not really sure why the Tories are having this row down, because the polls show that there's fairly consistent public support for the idea. You know, Britain had World Health Organization vaccine passports back in the 1950s for people born abroad to come in and show they had various vaccinations. I've got one now for yellow fever, which shows that if to go elsewhere in the world, to enter other countries, doctors need them in our NHS to carry out surgery, need a hepatitis injection to carry out some surgeries. So it's really just the wingnuts on the Tory backbenches, isn't it? They've whipped up this as an anti-freedom issue, which it isn't particularly, because it gives you freedom if you show a passport somewhere.
You've stolen the point right out of my mouth, Susie. My point was going to be that the Tory backbenchers say that this is an imposition on our civil liberties, which of course it is. But I would say it's a damn sight bigger imposition on your civil liberties to be told you can't leave your house for more than an hour a day, and you can't see any of your friends, and you can't see your dying grandma in a care home.
Yeah.
So
and if you're disabled, you're shut indoors.
That's going on here. Yeah. And the question, of course, is we are not like we were last winter. Cases are astronomically higher than they were last winter. But I mean, deaths, more than 100 deaths a day is a lot of people dying of this disease, but it is not on the scale that it was before. And the government is making a judgment that they can keep these measures kind of in reserve and not use them yet, and that those deaths are essentially a price that they are willing to pay for keeping society freer. And that's why this debate is so emotionally charged, because the people who support vaccine passports, and as you say, there are quite a lot of them, were saying, well, what's it to me if I have to show a thing on my phone that I've been vaccinated when I go to a show? It's not like it's an essential service going to see a West End show. You know, if you want to go, get vaccinated, and if you don't want to get vaccinated, then don't go, is what the proponents of this say. And that could potentially save some lives down the line, because you have less infection circulating, you stop it a bit more, and the very, very small percentage now of people, because most people are vaccinated, that are up in hospital and dying would be a little bit of a smaller number.
Yeah. Now, Sue says none of this will work. The vaccine is not stopping the spread. There's two parts to this, Sue. The vaccine does stop the spread. What the issue is that the spread is so much exponentially greater now than it was in previous waves. This time last year, there were 2,500 daily new infections. At the moment, it's 25,000 daily new infections. And that's not because the vaccine is totally not working. It's because if we didn't have the vaccine, the 25,000 would be 250,000. It would be rampant. All right. And so they're working, but having a much, only a tiny proportion of people who've had the vaccine or who don't want the vaccine, a tiny proportion of the population will get COVID. If you're letting everybody be exposed to something, then that tiny proportion is actually quite a big number. And then if a tiny proportion of them go to hospital, again, that is a big number. And that may be bigger or the same kind of size as we had before we even had the vaccines. Doesn't mean the vaccine isn't working. It just means that it's the maths that's working in the virus's favour. Now, Sharon says, I went to Pride Canterbury. Sorry, Dan.
I was just going to add that we should say the vaccine, it's right. The vaccine doesn't stop the spread. The vaccine enormously reduces the spread, the symptomatic infection, the serious infection, and death. That's why we have 250,000 cases or something a week, and a much lower death rate peaks before.
Exactly. Thank you, Dan. Now, Sharon says, I went to Pride Canterbury on Saturday. They checked our bags, nothing else. It was packed. He should make masks and social distancing mandatory. We are getting into that time of the year, Dan, where people are going to be indoors. This time last year, we were going to the Royal Festival Hall and stuff and watching the proms. There's lots of talk then about infections and so on. Sharon there wants social distancing to come back and masks to be made more of a rule. And tomorrow, Boris Johnson is going to be giving a press conference, isn't he, about some new possible restrictions coming back again. Do we have any idea what it is he's going to say? Dan, are you there? No, Dan seems to have gone again. Just in case he comes back, he's going to have to log off and come back in. And our technical issues speaking to Parliament continue. This is part of the problem we have when we talk to our parliamentary team. Unfortunately, in the lobby there, they have terrible connections. They're either on parliamentary Wi-Fi or hardwired mirror connection, but it's just appalling because the phone lines are bad and broadband in Britain generally is bad. Is Dan there? Can you hear us, Dan? He's looking at us, but we can't hear him. Dan, if you can hear us, I was just saying, what do we expect the Prime Minister to say tomorrow in his press conference?
It's very shaky. Let's see how we go. Say again.
What do we expect the Prime Minister to say tomorrow in his press conference?
Right. I hope you can hear me because I can hardly hear you. So let's start.
This is going brilliantly.
I'll know that.
I'll put it in. We've got a private chat, everybody, and I'm going to put what my question is to Dan in the private chat, and hopefully he'll see it in there and be able to answer us. Dan, do you have any idea what the Prime Minister is going to be saying in the COVID press conference tomorrow? No, I don't think we're getting anywhere. If you want to know why we're having...
what the Prime Minister is going to... Sorry.
Go on.
No, sorry. No, I'm going to have to go.
Dan's going out and coming back in again. Maybe we'll try in a bit. My word, the BBC doesn't have these problems. If you want to know why we have these issues with Britain's third world broadband, then have a look at reboot.mirror.co.uk. It's an investigation into the state of the nation's broadband I did a few months ago, and it explains all of this, and it's Thatcher's fault. Don't want to be a spoiler, but there we go. And there are lots of things we could do. If you've got a bad connection at home, there's some stuff in there as well at the end about how you can improve your connection. But we're going to move on to the next story now while we wait for Dan to rejoin, if he ever does. Everyone's favourite person, Priti Patel, a friend of migrants everywhere, has been embroiled in yet another lobbying row. This is one where a private lunch seems to have been worryingly workmanlike. I would ask Dan to take us through it, but he's not here, so I'm going to have to try and do it. And what was revealed is that Priti had a meeting at a Heathrow airport with a businessman, I think he was an Indian businessman, who is interested in not only COVID bailout money, but also a third runway at Heathrow. Her fellow Tory MP, Kwasi Kwarteng, who is business minister and a local MP, was also at that lunch, as well as a representative, I think, of British Airways. I'll just check that. And let me just get it right. And she says, the fear is that this was basically a lobbying meeting, and they're asking a minister to do something for their business. Now, if that's the case, yes, also at the meeting was BA Corporate Affairs Director. So if that is the case, and it's a lobbying meeting, they're allowed, they're perfectly legitimate, but you're supposed to declare it. It's got to be known about by your department, and a civil servant from your department is supposed to be present to take a note of everything. It's in the ministerial code, which says a private secretary or official should be present for all discussions relating to government business. You can't go and talk about government stuff without someone who actually works for the government, other than the politician, being there. And that seems to be what's happened. Now, there's a chap called Sir Alistair Graham, which is what this story is about this morning. He used to be the Standards Commissioner, this ethical watchdog, if you like, for Boris Johnson. And he says Priti Patel has to go over this if it was a secret meeting and if she didn't declare, and if there was no government advisor present, which the government so far assures us there isn't. Dan is back. Dan, can you hear us?
Just about.
We're just talking about Priti Patel. I'm right in saying that the allegation she's broken the ministerial code because there was no civil servant present at her meeting with this businessman. Is that right?
That's right. I expect I'm going to repeat everything you've just told everyone, but the story from our Sunday political editor, Nigel Nelson, is essentially that she had a meeting with a Tory donor and the boss of Heathrow Airport, because he is essentially a pal, and invited her to come to his hotel and have a look and, come for lunch and so forth. So she went for this meeting. Now, it is okay to bump into a friend at a party, as often happens with ministers at, say, conference season and stuff, and they suddenly get you in the corner and they lobby you about such and such government policy. But the rules are that you have to then tell your officials, the government employees, as soon as you can after that. And this doesn't even seem to be a case of that happening, because he invited her. So yes, ministers can have friends. They can go and see friends, and they don't have to have officials taking notes of their meetings with friends. But this friend happens to be a very interested kind of a businessman. And if you are discussing, or you expect to discuss government business, you need to bring officials along and have them take minutes. But this is, and it seems that they didn't, but this is what Labour wants answers on. They want to know how soon she told her officials afterwards, and whether indeed she's broken the ministerial code, as people suspect. Now, the problem is that this is part of a long pattern of behaviour in the Conservative Party. They have...
Right, and Priti Patel as well.
Well, Priti Patel was sacked for holding off the book's meeting, so it's particularly unfortunate for her. But I don't think we should make this all about her, because it's a culture. Labour gets most of its money from the unions, and there is plenty of criticism from that, about that, rightly or wrongly. And the Tories get most of their money from private donors, the large majority of it from very, very rich kind of individual donors who might give £100,000, £200,000, rightly or wrongly. Now, what the Tories do is they offer donors a chance to have dinner with the Prime Minister and senior ministers. And those dinners are off the books, they're present, they are a special event. But, I mean, I would eat my hat if those people who have paid £100,000 and then also, by instance, have no intention of bringing up any gold during those dinners. I mean, it'd be a fool not to if a tax hike was about to hit your business empire. You happen to have the Prime Minister's ear at a dinner that you have tried very hard and paid a lot of money to get to talk about what the weather and the cricket are doing, you know. So this is a problem. The Conservatives insist that everything abides by the law because they declare the donations to the Electoral Commission. And that's how we know that, you know, donors are meeting the Prime Minister, because we know this because they declare the donations. But it's enough.
Yeah. Now, it's also...
Did you hear all that, Susie? Question.
Bits of it came and went. Interestingly, despite our technical issues, our viewing figures aren't dipping. So presumably people just like watching a disaster unfold in front of them on their computer screen. Now, interestingly, this Alistair Graham, the guy who says Priti Patel today should be sacked, is the same guy who said last year she should be sacked over the bullying row. And because she wasn't, he then had to resign as Boris Johnson's ethics watchdog. So seeing as Boris didn't listen to him last time, it's pretty unlikely, I would say. I wouldn't stake my mortgage on him listening to him this time. Now, we need to move on a bit because we do have some technical issues. So we're going to go straight to the good news. And there is some. Here it is. Yep, for once it's good news. It's actually on the front page, and further in here in more detail on page 5. This is the new cancer test that can spot fragments of cancer DNA in your blood. Dan's gone. Maybe he's never coming back. We don't never see him again. He's been eaten by the gremlins. It will spot cancer DNA, fragments of cancer DNA in your blood, and diagnose it early before you show any symptoms, which is expected to produce great results in terms of getting those cancers that are hardest to spot the symptoms of early, and therefore they only tend to get spotted late. So cancers like pancreas, cancer of the head, cancer of the neck, bowel, throat, lung cancer, things like that. The NHS is launching a new clinical trial for it, and it should be available if successful in 2024, 2025. And the good news is that 140,000 NHS patients are going to be invited to take part in this trial. So whether you feel peaky or not, whether you already have cancer or not, whether you feel you're at risk or not, if you get an invitation, please, please, please accept it. Take part in this trial. And then they will hopefully have the data they need to roll it out for everybody and to know how it works. And that will save thousands of lives from particularly horrid and aggressive cancers. Now, we've got one more question before we end. Boris is looking to put us back in lockdown over winter. If so, is school, etc., looking at being closed? I think probably schools are going to stay open. That would be my bet. Obviously, Dan's not here to tell us what the parliamentary answer to that question is. But I don't know if it's going to be a lockdown, but there's definitely, I would bet my house on there being restrictions. Sharon and everybody else, I said this last year, I said it over the summer, I said it in spring, I said it now, we're going into autumn. There will be restrictions over the winter period because infections are so high that the tiny proportion of people who haven't had a vaccine, the tiny proportion who have had a vaccine but who will nevertheless somehow get some kind of COVID, and the tiny proportion of those people who will have COVID bad enough to be hospitalized is going to be quite a big number, because there's a lot of us in the country, and a tiny proportion of a big number is still a big number. And because the infection's been allowed to spread rampantly over the summer, some kind of strange, crazed herd immunity policy that Boris has had, then we're going to have some big numbers, I think, in hospital this winter, and we will need masks, social distancing, and a few other things. Becky says, shame the Gremlins didn't get, I'm presuming you're saying Boris Johnson and not anything else that the initials BJ may stand for. I don't think Gremlins get those. We'll ask him when we're backstage. Thank you, everyone, for persevering with us. Thank you, Dan, if you're out there in the ether somewhere. Join us again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda, which hopefully won't be coming from the office in Parliament. And if it is, someone will actually plug the router back in. See you on Wednesday, everybody. Bye-bye.